Today I'm going to change the oil on my MT07. It's the first time I've ever done it, the bike's pretty new, I'm going to show you how it's done, looks pretty easy. Let's do it. Step 1 is to go for a ride on the bike. Don't just idle it, you need the bike at full operating temperature and the oil inside needs to be hot. The hotter oil behaves thinner and will drain more thoroughly when we pull the sump plug out. The MT07 might be the easiest bike to change the oil on. The oil filter and sump plug are located right next to each other, meaning only one drain pan is needed. Because it's a naked bike, there's plenty of working room, and the oil filter used is the old style metal screw off and screw on again filters with a rubber gasket, as opposed to a paper filter inside a housing. Before we get started, here are some things you may need. Definitely get yourself some mechanics gloves. Boxes of hundreds of them are on Amazon for less than 10 quid and they'll last years. I definitely would recommend these as used engine oil is carcinogenic. The oil I'm using is Motul Fully Synthetic 1040. I also have the 1030 variant, but that's for my Honda. Annoyingly, Honda decides to be the only manufacturer to use 1030 in nearly all of its bikes, where everyone else is 1040, so I can't share the container. I'm also using a K&N oil filter. They have a very good anti-drain back valve, and they also have a 17mm nut on the front, making it really easy to get on and off. These are really good. Socket wrench, 17mm socket is standard for sump plugs, and this has seen some fair usage. Get yourself a nice big dedicated oil drain pan and accept that it can never be used for anything else as soon as carcinogenic engine oil touches it. I keep this aside with other tools that I use just for oil changes. Get yourself some blue mechanics roll as well. It's cheap, it lasts years, and it can clean up any spills if they do happen to occur. Start by undoing the sump plug with the socket. Ideally, make sure that you've got the bowl back underneath before you start undoing it fully. I almost forgot. However, I did manage to keep hold of the sump plug when I took it all the way out. This is not always easy to do, and often it can get lost in the hot oil and be untouchable for the next 20 minutes. To make sure the oil drains smoothly, you need to undo the oil filler cap on the top part of the engine. This lets air go into the engine as the oil comes out. I loosely thread it back on to make sure no dust or grit could get in. Next, it's time to remove the old oil filter, which I couldn't do. I tried my oil filter removal tool, but that wouldn't fit. Always give yourself way longer on DIY jobs. Something always happens and the job ends up taking twice as long.
It's fucking stuck.
At this point, I reminded myself why I use K&N. The Americans know what's up, and that 17mm socket on the front of the oil filters makes them so easy to get off and makes this problem a complete thing of the past. Fast forward 20 minutes, I've been trying to get this thing off and it won't budge. I resort to hammering a screwdriver through the front of the filter to use as a lever to get off, and even this proves difficult. I'm looking forward to this not being an issue again next time. What a pain in the ass. Always give yourself plenty of extra time in case you run into problems like this. This took 20 minutes to get off. I had to hammer holes through, turn and repeat. The threads on the bike go quite deep into the oil filter, so if you do this, always hammer holes on the far end of the filter away from the bike to make sure you're not knocking the threads. Just to show you how different this is to my other bike, a CRF 250L, the filter is located in a metal housing with a gasket, but I've got to remove the bash plate to get to it. It's a totally different job, completely different to changing the filter on an MT07. I give the area where the oil filter contacts a quick clean just to make sure it's not contaminated. This will make sure that the K&N filter gets a really good seal against the metal wall on the bike. Not only do K&N filters have the anti-drain back valve and a 17mm nut on the front for easy removal, they also have a pre-lubricated O-ring using proper assembly lube rather than just new oil. A tip for threading these on, or threading anything, is to thread backwards first, wait for a click so you know you're in the right threads, and then continue to thread normally. These only need to be hand tight. The sump plug and washer are in great shape and don't need to be replaced. When tightening back into the engine, make sure that you don't over tighten because the aluminium from the engine casing is still warm and may be softer than normal. This will mean it can be easily threaded, which will be a way bigger headache than a stuck filter. Always get yourself a measuring jug when topping up the oil. The oil containers have really imprecise measurements and can't be used accurately. The amount of oil required on the MT07 is shown in the little eyeglass where the oil level is measured. Get yourself a funnel as well. Again, these are dirt cheap and it'll make sure you're not spilling this all over your bike. I then give a thorough wipe to the engine oil filler cap and the area it screws into, always wiping away from the hole to make sure nothing goes inside. Any grit or sand in here wouldn't be great. The next step is to get the bike outside and have it idling for about 10 minutes to get the oil flowing, fill the new filter, and we can then accurately measure the oil level and see if we need to top it up. Whenever I'm working on either of my bikes, I always keep the garage door half shut to not advertise the fact there's two bikes in here. I quickly realised on this I was going to need both hands to move my bike and I wasn't going to be able to film at the same time, so I'll fast forward on this. Anything other than recycling used engine oil is a complete dick move. Tipping it down a drain, putting it in a hole in the ground or putting it in the bin will result in it working its way to the water table. With a ratio of 1 million to 1 for contamination, 1 litre of used engine oil contaminates 1 million litres of drinking water. You dump it, you drink it. After letting the bike idle for 10 minutes and rest for 2, I check the final oil level. I hold the bike upright with one hand and film in the other hand, which is quite difficult. I always find I'm on the slightly lower end of the oil reservoir, meaning I'll need to top it up afterwards. This gives me pleasure knowing that I've removed more contaminated oil than your average Joe, than the manufacturer recommends. I think this is because of the fact that I let the bike warm up thoroughly first, and I let it drain for longer than would normally happen at a dealership. I imagine they wheel one bike in, quickly change the oil, put the sump in and fill her up, the customer pays and they get the next bike in. It's a much quicker turnaround. I'm looking around the bike and it's absolutely filthy. I'm going to top up the oil and give the bike a clean in the next video. Hopefully this helped someone. Be sure to like, comment and subscribe if it did, and I'll do more.